Meeting between the leaders of Russia and North Korea is now in the works. CBS News has learned Kim Jong Un and Vladimir Putin will meet later this month to discuss arms negotiations between the two countries as Moscow continues its war in Ukraine. Imtiaz Tayeb is in Kyiv following the latest for us. Imtiaz, good morning.
Wendy, Weija, good to be with you. While the White House is really calling on Kim to cease negotiations with Putin and commit to his promise not to provide arms to Moscow. But it looks like a major deal between the repressive regimes is very close.
Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong Un are no strangers. The leaders met in the far eastern Russian city of Vladivostok in 2019 for their first ever summit, where they vowed to boost ties between their nations. Now, 18 months into President Putin's unprovoked war on Ukraine, Moscow wants help from Pyongyang. According to the New York Times, a major weapons deal is on the table, with Kim expected to make the roughly 400-mile journey back to Vladivostok on his armored train to meet with Putin later this month. He will reportedly discuss exchanging a significant quantity of North Korean-made weapons and ammunition for advanced Russian satellite technology, nuclear-powered submarines, and food aid. Whatever's agreed, Putin's brutal war grinds on. At a media briefing alongside the Turkish president, he lashed out at Kyiv's counteroffensive, saying, "It's not a stalling, it's a failure." On a visit to an undisclosed location, President Volodymyr Zelensky met with frontline soldiers. "It's very useful to hear from those who go into battle directly," he said, "to know what's lacking and what needs to be changed." The Biden administration is expected to announce a new military aid package for Kyiv later this week. Weapons that, for Ukrainian forces, can't come soon enough.
We're hearing this meeting could happen as early as next week, but any deal made to supply weapons could add to the already crippling Western sanctions both countries are under. But neither Moscow nor Pyongyang seems to care. Wendy, Weija.
Imtiaz, more on that meeting. Do we know exactly what's going to happen at this point?
Very good question. Look, all intelligence points to the fact that these two leaders are going to meet, as we've been saying again, as early as next week. But I think we can sort of class this into two buckets. I think on the one hand, there's real desperation here on the part of the Russians, who desperately need munitions, the kind that they're hoping to get from Pyongyang. If you look at the state of the war right now, it is a grinding stalemate ever since Ukraine launched its counteroffensive, and Russia also desperately needs more munitions. Turning to North Korea for that kind of help underscores the second issue here, which I think is desperation. Desperation on the part of Russia, but also on North Korea. North Korea, of course, a very impoverished country, a very isolated country. And, you see that desperation, but there's also defiance here because they know that if they enter an agreement with each other, they will be sanctioned. In fact, the U.S., the White House, Britain has told North Korea, listen, if you get into a kind of deal like this with Russia, it will be in violation of UN resolutions. But it seems like a deal is imminent. Wendy, Weija.
Imtiaz, Putin also met with Turkey's president yesterday in Russia to discuss a grain deal. Did anything come out of those talks?
It didn't go well, to put it bluntly. Erdogan went to Sochi to try to iron out a deal which so many countries around the world are so desperate to see revived. Of course, that grain deal, which will see Ukrainian grain pass through the Black Sea into the global market for many vulnerable countries who so desperately rely on Ukrainian grain. Ukraine, of course, one of the world's largest provider of grain. But Vladimir Putin, extremely defiant in that meeting with Erdogan, saying, listen, we had this deal. You said that we'd be able to export Russian food, Russian fertilizer. That didn't happen. Why should I allow this to happen with Ukrainian grain? He also went on to say that global food prices are coming down. So why does the world need that food from Ukraine? But of course, as we've been saying, many countries desperately rely on that food supply, something Vladimir Putin is standing in the way of. Guys.
The Biden administration expected to announce a new military aid package for Ukraine later this week. What does Ukraine want?
Yeah, well, Ukraine wants a lot of stuff. They want a lot of weapons, of course, as we've been saying. These things are really kind of grinding into a stalemate. But what they're going to get, we kind of have a bit of information on it. We're hearing that for the first time, the Biden administration will provide these controversial army-piercing munitions that contain depleted uranium. These munitions are so powerful that they can destroy a Russian tank. We're also hearing that in the next few weeks that Ukraine will be provided with these already promised M1 Abrams battle tanks. While these won't exactly be game changers on the battlefield, which is something that Ukraine is so desperate given the fact that it has become such a grinding stalemate, it will certainly help Ukraine's cause as it tries to push Russia out of its territories. Wendy, Ouija.
MTS, thank you.